Hello, this is Good Morning Transfers. Raheem Sterling's Chelsea future is in question after he was left out of the squad to face Manchester City and is criticised for a statement released by his camp. We'll react to that story and we will be live to Brentford with Ivan Toney's future also in doubt. There might be a significant incoming to West London as well. Scott McTominay to Fulham may well still happen. And we'll take a look at this weekend's debutants. As ever, if you are out and about, you can keep up to date with all the latest transfer news and our dedicated Transfer Centre blog. Just scan the QR code on your screen right now. Well, morning, everyone. Morning to James Savundra, to Dave Reed and to Flex. You guys all right?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, good, because we've got a lot to get through. A lot happened over the last 24 hours. We're going to start with Chelsea. Not the first or the last time that I've probably said that. Beaten by Manchester City, of course, 2-0 on Super Sunday. One of the big stories to come out of the game was the result, but also Raheem Sterling being left out of the squad and his representatives taking the unusual step of releasing a statement before the game. Dave, this is another mess, really, for Chelsea, isn't it? Just explain what was in the statement, remind us that, and why this is a headache for Chelsea.
Well, the timing of the statement has also made a few people's eyebrows raise, shall we say, over the last 24 hours. It was released just before or around the team news dropping ahead of the game at Stamford Bridge between Chelsea and Manchester City. It was an on-the-record statement from Raheem Sterling's representatives, essentially asking for clarity on the player's situation. As you say, he was left out of the squad. And within the statement, the point was made that Sterling returned early during pre-season to train individually. The point was also made that he had a good relationship with the head coach Enzo Maresca during pre-season. And given the fact that he was involved in the pre-match content build-up to this game against Manchester City, I think the expectation from him and his representatives that he would be involved in some way in this game yesterday. And then it turned out that he wasn't. So essentially the statement was asking for a little bit of clarity on the player's situation as a whole, where he stands, basically.
OK, well, this was the reasoning for the decision given by the Chelsea boss, Enzo Maresca, in his post-match press conference.
Next day, probably we're going to sit and clarify the situation, but it's nothing more than that. Then for all the players that in this moment they are Chelsea player, if they're going to be Chelsea player, we're going to try to use them. But no more than technical decision.
So can I just clarify, do you want Raheem Sterling to stay at this club?
I want Raheem Sterling, but I want all the 30 players that we have, but there is no space for all of them. So for some of them, they have to leave.
Interesting. Well, I mean, they've got loads of players, James, haven't they? So they clearly need to get rid of some of them. But was it still a big surprise that an experienced player like that is not even in the squad?
I think it was, because it goes against what we heard from Enzo Maresca there. It goes against what he told us in pre-season. He said that Raheem Sterling is one of our most important players. But you look at the players ahead of him in the squad yesterday. You had Cole Palmer and Christopher Nkunku on either flank, and then on the bench, Neto, Mudryk and Madueke. So there wasn't necessarily room for another winger in the form of Sterling. The thing is, what's important to realise here is he was actually the marquee signing that Chelsea made in 2022 by the new owners. And this could potentially be the first senior player they brought to depart the football club. Perhaps the first admittance that a mistake was made in signing him. Things haven't worked out over the course of the last two seasons. I think at any other club, with a player releasing a statement like this an hour before kick-off, the opening day of the season, that would be seen as a crisis. But this is simply just another normal day at Chelsea. It's incredible what's going on at the moment, and it's incredible the amount of work they're going to have to do between now and the end of this month to get players out of the squad that simply don't have a future at the club. There's a lot of work they're going to have to do, and for Enzo Maresca, he simply just needs to focus on gearing this up for the Premier League season and just back the club to move on players that aren't part of his plans. But the fact is, he featured in every game during pre-season, and full expectation after hearing him speak to club media earlier in the week was that he would have a decent role to play and he would be part of that 20-man squad. The fact he wasn't makes you think that his future could be elsewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, Flex, is there any way back from him now for him? I mean, left out the squad and then the statement as well. Is that the last time we've seen him in a Chelsea shirt?
It looks untenable, doesn't it? With Chelsea having so many players, of course, not making matchday squads, we know what their new setup is and their new direction is. But a senior player, a player on, you know, a big wage at Chelsea Football Club, a player who has expectations of himself, and the fans with him coming in on with the experience that he has would be expecting big things from Raheem Sterling. It hasn't quite worked out at Chelsea in the last couple of years, but his intentions were there. But I think when you go public like that, in terms of essentially undermining the manager's decision, this is a difference of opinion, essentially. Maresca saying, I've left him out for technical reasons. Raheem Sterling saying, I don't know why. His camp basically saying, we don't know why. We haven't been given an inclination as to that. That wasn't our understanding. So I think it's really difficult to see Raheem Sterling playing for Chelsea again. Now he's gone so public as well with that statement.
I think it's hard to say that it hasn't worked out for Raheem Sterling. I think you both have said that it's not worked out, but I think he would say, you know, I've probably not hit top form since signing for Chelsea, but who has? Apart from Cole Palmer, who has? And therefore, if we're saying it's not worked out for Raheem Sterling, it's not worked out for any of them.
He's worked under 5 different managers already at his time at Chelsea. Tuchel, Potter, Lampard, Pochettino last season, and now Maresca. Yes, things haven't worked out for him, but there's been reasons why we haven't seen the best of him, like we did at Manchester City.
I have a bit of sympathy for Sterling in this situation. He's taken a lot of heat over the last 24 hours for this statement. Yeah, I get it. You know, the timing. I understand the criticism of the timing of this statement. But I think if it was any other club, you would probably have the argument to say it was absolutely the wrong way to go for Raheem Sterling. But this is Chelsea. They've broken the mould in the last couple of years. And essentially, they've brought this situation on themselves. By signing the sheer number of players that they have, they're going to have unhappy players. And, yeah, I know, and on the record statement is a little bit unusual, but for me it feels like actually that has accelerated this situation coming to a conclusion for Raheem Sterling. His camp could have said nothing and briefed a line to this paper, They've said, no, this is the situation. And now there's going to have to be a meeting between Sterling, his reps and Chelsea to say this is the situation. If Sterling doesn't feel that Chelsea have been clear enough with him, he can get that clarity and go, OK, Maresca can say, you're part of my plans. It was a tactical, technical decision, whatever he wants to say. Or he can say, I've signed 4 wingers and unfortunately there's going to be no more room for you. This on the record statement for me has accelerated that situation. And Sterling, all he needs to do is look at what's going on with Conor Gallagher, what's going on with Trevor Chalobah, what's going on with Ben Chilwell, what's going on with Carney Chukwuemeka. I think he knows what he's capable of. He knows he's capable of playing for Chelsea. He'll be backing himself to play there. And therefore, he just wants a little bit of clarity.
That's what it seems
forward.
like, doesn't it? In terms of players who basically had enough. And there's 2 contrasting situations. So you look at the way that Conor Gallagher is currently handling his situation in radio silence and not coming out and talking and making big statements. But Raheem Sterling has chosen to go a different line in this.
He's also a bit less experienced, isn't he?
Exactly.
So Raheem Sterling, maybe it sort of hits a bit harder when you have that level of Premier League experience. I mean, he's only 29 years old, right? So he's not over the hill by any means. If we're saying his position is pretty much untenable at Chelsea, where could he go?
Well, this is the difficult situation because I've been looking into a few potential clubs that Raheem Sterling could arrive at. It's difficult because you have to look at how does Raheem Sterling see his career now? Like we just said, 29 years of age, plenty of years left in the tank. This is a very experienced player. This is a player who's scored 136 Premier League goals. He's got 4 Premier League titles. He's played 82 times in the Champions League. He's got an awful lot to offer. But when you look at the traditional top 6 or the teams that are competing at the end of the table that Raheem would probably want to be at, it's quite difficult. I look at Arsenal. I think they're quite settled on the left-hand side. Yes, he brings experience, but they've kind of been there and done that. I don't think it really fits the profile of what Mikel Arteta is trying to achieve there. You can't see a move back to Liverpool, and even with the players that are available at Liverpool in that area, again, same situation. Manchester United, I can't see it. Marcus Rashford is nailed on pretty much on the left-hand side with Alejandro Garnacho to support there. I did get to Newcastle, and I looked at that and thought, could there be a situation there? Newcastle with PSR issues and looking to really heavily strengthen its centre-half. But then again, Anthony Gordon's on the left-hand side with Harvey Barnes to come through as well. I looked at Spurs. Son probably going to go back to the left-hand side. And I can't see Sterling displacing him. On the right-hand side, Sterling hasn't played there for quite a while. It's not really his natural position at the moment in this version of Sterling. So then you're looking at maybe outside of the Premier League, somewhere in Europe, AC Milan, Inter Milan, Juve. There was interest from Juventus earlier in the window. They have looked at different wingers. They've discussed Jadon Sancho. We've seen reports linking them to Raheem Sterling. So it is really difficult. And if you're also looking at wages as well, that's a big concern. So I think this is a mixture of the ambitions of Raheem Sterling and where he sees his future in terms of, does he want to be competing for league titles in different countries? Does he want to be competing for the big trophies? Or is he happy to take a step down in his career? Is he happy to sort of say, actually, I understand the position I'm in, but I just want to play football? He's had an awful lot of football throughout his whole career. This is one of England's brightest talents since the age of 16, from coming out of QPR's academy, going to Liverpool. He's been at massive, massive clubs. And Raheem Sterling now finds himself in a position where you're thinking, where does he go?
I mean, guys, you got any thoughts on what might be a good fit?
It's difficult to think of options in the Premier League where he could go, because there's the wage issue as well. The way that clubs are structured and so well run, they may look at Raheem Sterling and his output over the last 2 seasons and aren't willing to take the punt on him. A couple of years ago, he'd have been the ideal option, you'd think, for a lot of clubs. But now, 29 years of age, yes, he's still got a lot of football ahead of him, you'd think, so he keeps himself in great shape. But there does seem to be limited options in the Premier League, I think, that would take him on at this stage. I think Europe probably looks like a more likely option, or potentially a club from the Saudi Pro League comes in.
All right, one more line from Chelsea for you. Before yesterday's game, Maresca also confirmed that left-back Ben Chilwell can leave the club and that the club will listen to offers for him. They do need to offload more players, James. Why is Ben Chilwell on that list of players, though?
Enzo Maresca said that he's struggling to find the right position. It feels like Ben Chilwell just doesn't simply fit into the style of play that Chelsea will have under Enzo Maresca, that possession-dominated, dominant team. There's no place, it feels like, for conventional fullbacks within this system. We've seen that Marc Cucurella, who had a difficult start to life at Chelsea, could be absolutely integral to the way Chelsea play under Enzo Maresca, and he had a really impressive end to last season. Of course, he was brilliant the Euros for Spain as well. For Chilwell, the writing has seemed to be on the wall for a few weeks. Just played 64 minutes in pre-season, didn't feature at all in the final 3 matches. But it's remarkable how quickly things move in football. Last year, he was named the vice-captain by Mauricio Pochettino. He was brilliant in the opening game of last season against Liverpool. He's had all those injury issues as well, which ruled him out of the Euros as well. And the fact is that 21-year-old summer signing, Renato Vega, is now ahead of him in the pecking order. He came off the bench yesterday. But for Chilwell, he only signed a contract extension last year. He's got 3 years to run on that contract. He might not want to leave, as much as Chelsea may be looking to find an exit route for him.
Yeah. I know you've been doing some digging on some Chilwell stats. I mean, does he just not fit into Maresca's style?
He doesn't, but if we're looking at the appearances as well that he's managed to make and the varying nature of how little he's available, I think it's really concerning. In terms of the last 3 seasons, Ben Chilwell's missed 100 games of football. That is absolutely staggering. So he's had massive problems. You look at the 2021 season, playing 27 games and playing 2,290 minutes. That's fairly good, but look at the drop there to 21-22, playing just 7 games and making only 541 minutes played. Then into 22-23, there's a raise in that because he's slightly fitter, but not as good as the season before that again. And then you get to 23-24 last season, just played 13 games and 756 minutes. So there's a common theme there with missing a lot of games, with hamstring injuries. I think he had a severe knee problem. It was happening at sort of the back end of Leicester, his stint there as well. And it's just sheer lack of availability. And when you are that unavailable, it's very difficult to get any continuity in any manager's system, to embed yourself in any squad and to be relied upon. And then you look at the revolving door at Chelsea in terms of the different managers, the different chaos that keeps happening. How on earth is Ben Chilwell going to be able to nail down a place? And that is before we've even got on to stylistically probably better as an advanced full-back, like a wing-back, going beyond players on the overlap, getting crosses in the box. Enzo Maresca wants to play possession-based football. He wants his left-back to be inverting and getting onto the ball. He wants his left-back to be winning 1v1 duels. When you look at Cucurella, yes, there's some question marks over his game, but one thing you will get with him is he is going to be up for a battle. He is going to embrace 1v1 duels, and that isn't a big skill set or a big attribute for Ben Chilwell. So very, very difficult for him now.
Yeah. OK, any news that we get on either Ben Chilwell or Raheem Sterling, we will, of course, let you know. Also on Conor Gallagher, almost a week on now since he returned from Madrid. Still no breakthrough with that deal either. And that also depends, of course, on João Felix as well, whether Chelsea can sort something out with Felix. Not long to go in this window. Next, we are live to Brentford as Ivan Toney weighs up a potential move to Saudi. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Another player that didn't feature yesterday was Ivan Toney. There could be big developments on his future over the coming. For the very latest, let's get to the club's training ground right now and join Paul Gilmore. Hello, Paul. This potentially could be one of the biggest transfers of the window. Bring us up to speed.
Well, good morning, Matt. Yes, Ivan Toney's mission from the Brentford squad to face Crystal Palace yesterday was transfer-related, as told by Brentford boss Thomas Frank yesterday. It's a development, really. It emerges after news of a failed bid from Saudi Arabia, Al Ali, the club involved making a bid to Brentford, but clearly nowhere near their valuation, so that was rejected. And since Ivan Toney made it clear that he did want a new challenge away from Brentford as his contract was running out, he's got 1 year left on that contract. There has been a lot of interest in him, but crucially, no one has yet been able to submit a bid that meets Brentford's needs, and therefore Ivan Toney remains a player. That said, time is running out to strike a deal, and obviously in this transfer window, and when a player generally is left out of a match-day squad, it's always a sign that maybe something could just be beginning to move, and that's maybe the case with Ivan Toney now as the interest ramps up and it gets to the serious stage of the transfer window.
Yeah, you're right, Paul. It is usually a sign, isn't it, when a player is left out, that something is close, that they're on the way. But in the past, Brentford have been very clear. They have a price for Toney, so I presume they're going to be sticking to those principles all the way through.
Yeah, quite often what happens in a situation like this is a club will decide upon a strategy and move forward with that strategy as they try to sell a player. So the decision will have already been taken to sell Ivan Toney. The player wants to go. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean they will cave in and do it, because ultimately Brentford have a striker who can score 20 goals a season. Thomas Frank has mentioned that many times and has spoken about the fact that this guy will get you goals. He's 28 years of age. He's at kind of a peak age for a footballer. The other side of that is, for a buying club, they're looking at the age as, yes, he's in his peak at this moment in time, but there's not much sell-on value, and if you look at the transfer trends over the last few years, a lot of clubs target younger players. So that's the other side of it. But it depends on that desire, that need. Is there a club that is just willing to go closer to Brentford's valuation? Is there a negotiation somewhere to meet just shy of that? We saw that situation develop with Harry Kane. With Tottenham and Bayern Munich, with 1 year left on the contract. It's becoming more and more common for players to run down contracts, and they will have a lot of power in that sense. But as we saw with Harry Kane, there will be clubs that still want to manage to secure a striker, especially a striker who gets a lot of goals, because that is quite a key position, isn't it? It's every football manager wants goals in the team, and that's really what's happening at the moment. I think I get the feeling that there will be a deal struck. But remember, Brentford, as recently as November 2023, Thomas Frank talked about Ivan Toney being worth £100 million. That might be less realistic with 1 year to go, but equally Brentford would be quite happy to keep hold of him, get more goals out of him, and the only risk with that is they don't get anything whatsoever if he leaves on a free next summer. So it's a really delicate, sensitive stage of this transfer saga, if you like. They're doing okay without him and have done okay without him in the games he missed because of his ban. And then yesterday against Crystal Palace, you've got the likes of Brian Mbeumo and Johan Vissa stepping up. Kevin Schade is also a player who they expect big things from here. So Ivan Toney very much the centre of this transfer saga and will continue, I'm sure, throughout the remainder of this window.
Top man, cheers, Paul. I'm sure you'll keep us posted should anything happen.
Dave, let's continue that chat on Ivan Toney. Just tell us, how important has he been since joining Brentford?
Yeah, no doubt about it. He scored plenty of goals, but I'm going to tell you why Brentford might just be OK without Ivan Toney. First, though, we have to take you back a little bit. He has really been the focal point of the Brentford attack. Toney scored 34.5% of Brentford's goals in 22-23, of course, only behind Harry Kane and Erling Haaland. The only problem is this wasn't last season. It's the season before last. And as Paul mentioned, Brentford have had to cope without Toney before because of his ban. So let's take a look at how they've got on over the last year with and without Ivan Toney. Remember, he returned in January for the final 17 games of the season. Brentford won more games. They scored more goals per games, conceded fewer, and they also had a higher win percentage as well. They've also collected more points per game without Ivan Toney. Thomas Frank had to shuffle things around without his main man up front and finished the season 13 points clear of the bottom three. Staying up, James, was a successful season for Brentford last year. Can they do it again? And will they do it again, but without Ivan Toney?
Well, Brentford have been preparing to lose Ivan Toney for a long period of time. In February, they confirmed the signing of Igor Thiago here, £30 million. However, he was injured in pre-season and is now out until the end of 2024. But Brentford showed yesterday and last season, as you were showing, Dave, they have enough firepower to cope. Toney missing for 20 matches last season. Johan Vissa and Brian Mbeumo, both of them scoring yesterday. They carried the goal-scoring burden. Vissa got 12, Mbeumo got 9, both on the score sheet against Crystal Palace. Thomas Frank also been boosted by the return to fitness of this man, Kevin Schade. He can play across the forward line. So Brentford won't panic if Toney does depart in this window. It would be interesting to see if they enter the market potentially for a stopgap. We saw Neil Maupay last season to such great effect. He really contributed towards keeping them in the top flight, and they've got Keane Lewis-Potter as well as a potential option. So with that in mind, Flex, thinking about the options Brentford had, a really impressive start to the season against Crystal Palace. Do you think they'll be panicking? And if they were to bring somebody in, do you think they need someone at this point in the window?
I think there'll be anything but panic at Brentford, and that's not to downplay Ivan Toney's contribution to Brentford, because he's been fantastic. He's given them great service and great value. But this isn't a surprise. Ivan Toney potentially moving club has been on the hot topic for quite a while now. The planning would have gone into this, and yes, his value seems to have dropped and the interest isn't quite there. But as you've just displayed there, guys, at the big screen, there's plenty of options. There's an optimism there. There's a calmness about it. And when you look at the players that they do have, especially in Wissa and in Mbeumo, when you look at last season with the burden that they carried, and they've started off this season literally yesterday on the front foot, scoring goals, I think Brentford fans should be encouraged by the planning and the people at Brentford who make the football decisions, and Thomas Frank. They're in good hands. Of course, Ivan Toney, or a player of that quality leaving the football club, is always going to be a dent. But to panic, I don't see that. This isn't something that's just sprung out of nowhere. He's got plenty of years left on his deal, and they need to cash in, and there's going to be a huge sum of money. And what are we going to do without him? As the stats just say, they've coped pretty well without Ivan, and that's saying something with a player of his calibre. So I think it's testament to actually the planning that's gone into this, and I don't think they should panic at all.
And just in terms of Toney and where he could go, where he should go, I mean, he's 28 years old, should be quite close to his prime. As we heard there from Paul, he was a £100 million player. In theory, not that long ago, a lot of big clubs we heard were interested in him. No offence to the Saudi League, but why would he go to Saudi at this stage of his career?
I think it's that saying about how things can change so quickly in football. I think initially there's a lot of shoulda, woulda, coulda. If the ban didn't happen and Ivan kept playing through that time and had a lorry load more of goals to contribute and was in fantastic form, maybe the interest would have been a lot higher. So lack of options is definitely something that I think would be taken into consideration. Of course, financially and the security that can give, getting a huge contract out in Saudi Arabia is a massive proposition. And, I mean, people can say about the standard out there, etc., but who's to say Ivan Toney doesn't look at it and say, I wouldn't mind playing with Riyad Mahrez, wouldn't mind playing with Roberto Firmino. These are top players. So it is a little bit of a surprise. I understand that, but I think the lack of offers on the table from said top 6 clubs, you have to look elsewhere. And if that's a feasible option at this point, and Brentford do need some money for him as well, they would want a conclusion. I don't think they would want him to stay and run down his contract and let him go on a free. So I think that could be on the cards unless something changes in Europe or somewhere in the Premier League.
Who knows? This might reignite some Premier League interest. We don't know if that happens. We will let you know. Coming up, we've had the chance to see some new players in action this weekend. The lads have picked out who stood out for them. Who stood out for you guys, though? Let us know. #TransferTalk. Which debutant impressed on the opening weekend of the Premier League? And we'll go through that after the break. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. We're almost at the end of the opening weekend of the Premier League. One more game to go, of course, tonight, Leicester against Spurs. But we've already had our chance, guys, to see quite a few debutants in action. And you've all picked your one debutant who's really impressed you. Let's start with you, Savundra. Have you picked this player because... sounds like you.
We must have the same.
Is that your name when you play
football? We'll have the same nickname, though. You can, either he goes with Savio or Savinho. It looks like it's going to be Savinho. I think he really impressed him. What was his Premier League debut? We saw him in the Community Shield against Manchester United. He looked really impressive. Just a 3-star because he had to come off at half-time. But what I really found refreshing was seeing Doku and Savinho run at defenders like old-school wingers. It was brilliant to watch because sometimes City are so effective, but it's not as easy. Build and possession there to unlock defences, but it was great to see how direct he was, and he was really impressive last season at Girona. Scored 9 goals, 11 assists, and I think the fact he joined from a side who were part of the City group means that transition to work under Pep Guardiola should be relatively seamless. And I think we were slightly concerned about what options City would have in that attacking area. Yes, they have Oscar Bob now ruled out for a period of time. Jack Grealish still struggling with a niggle. He was on the bench. But with Doku and Savinho, I found it really exciting. It's nice to see Pep changing up every now and again and having players like this that can just unlock defences, that X factor which he's got. So I think he could have a really good season.
Yeah, right. I'm all in for Doku and Savinho in the same team. Pep always tends to evolve his teams year on year, but it almost felt yesterday like it was a bit of a throwback from Pep Guardiola, the way he set his team up with the 2 flying wingers, the focal point up front. It almost felt like, almost, it's going to sound like a criticism, but it's not meant to be, almost like a rudimentary setup for Manchester City. There's nothing too, intricate going on in there. But it was so exciting to see. It was
almost
almost...
at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pep admitted afterwards, he sort of said, I'm learning. Those guys just swapped over, swapped wings halfway through the half, and, Cucurella Doku was sort of losing that battle against Cucurella, and he just swapped over, and he went, I'm learning, let them play.
And it worked, didn't it? Right, Savinho's gone for Savinho. Who are you going for?
Davinho. No, it's Amadou Onana. I thought he was brilliant. He absolutely smashed it on his debut, didn't he? Topped most of the metrics for Villa's rankings in the game. He just covers so much ground. He eats up the turf in the middle of midfield. Already got that relationship with Yuri Tielemans in the centre of midfield. And Villa have got great options, by the way, now as well. I mean, you look at the players that came off the bench against West Ham. That was always one of the problems, really, particularly at the back end of last season, because Villa had so many injuries. The players coming off the bench, I think Unai Emery would admit, weren't of the sufficient experience and quality that he would like. But that's what Villa have done in this transfer window. They've added depth. They've certainly raised the floor of the squad, and Onana, I think, is a player that really raises the ceiling of the squad because he's someone who is going to get better under Unai Emery. I think, one of the arguments would be that he hasn't been able to show all his skills at Everton, and I think now, within this Aston Villa setup, he is going to be a player that is able to improve and get better and better under Unai Emery. I thought it was a fantastic debut.
On that note, do you think, we saw him score the goal, bullet header, looks like he could be a real handful from set pieces.
Oh, yeah.
But he's not really had that goal threat in the last few years at Everton. You said about we've not seen all his skill set. Do you think he could offer a few goals and assists this year?
Well, you know, a lot of Villa fans have been thinking to themselves, how is Unai Emery going to evolve this team? You know, a lot of the teams have had a good look at Villa now under Unai Emery. They know kind of how they want to play with the four boxing midfield and Ollie Watkins up front. They've lost Douglas Luiz. And maybe this is the evolution of this side. Douglas Luiz was someone who could take the ball, drive forward and really play those intricate, creative passes. Onana is a different type of player. And he's maybe the difference point now, the differential at the moment for Aston Villa. And when you've got one of the best set-piece coaches in the business, and we saw the way they handled that set piece for the Onana goal, everything was kind of the target. They took a lot of long throws as well in that first half as another different way of getting the ball into the box for Aston Villa this season. Onana's going to be a really key player for them.
And you think he might be a real fan favourite as well. He's already revving up the away fans, isn't he? He speaks really well. He's a really likeable guy.
He's a big character, isn't he?
Yeah.
And actually, just an honourable mention as well to Ian Matson, who made his debut for Aston Villa in the league, came on, had a hand in the first goal as well. Fantastic options for Emery to have at left-back. That Villa squad now, you're looking at it quality-wise and you're looking at how they're going to manage being in the Champions League.
Get them all in the team as well, you know. They've got a few left-backs, haven't they? 3 good left-backs. Who have you picked then? You haven't gone for, Matson?
Well, there's no bias here. It's this man, Joshua Zirkzee. Giving him a 4 out of 5. I think Manchester United fans have had to listen to many people outside of the club telling Man United fans why they shouldn't be excited, why they shouldn't be jumping for joy. Well, actually, when your new signing comes off the bench, who's a new aspiring young forward in Europe, comes on and scores the winner, we will get excited, actually. And it's as simple as that. You know, I think to come on and have that sort of impact and to score a goal that he did, which was a vital goal that completely sort of changes the narrative around a 0-0 or potentially losing the game, which is, you don't want to be having that on the first day of the season. I think it's fantastic for him. It's a real confidence booster for him as well, and a sign of things to come that Manchester United have 2 young up-and-coming forwards. Rasmus Højlund obviously out at the minute. But you add Joshua Zirkzee into that now, there's options at Manchester United. The game was drifting away a little bit in terms of missed opportunities. Plenty of chances for Manchester United to hit the back of the net. Bruno snatching at a few. Mason Mount couldn't quite convert. Rashford, Garnacho at the end, yes. But then it was like, what can we look for? Can we have something off the bench? And now you're looking at it like, yes, we can be excited as Manchester United fans. We're not going to listen to the outside noise of be miserable all the time. The club's going in the right direction, and this was a fantastic debut.
Yeah, you stay positive.
There were some really nice touches towards the back end of the game as we were trying to run down the clock. Well, United were trying to run down the clock, giving away my allegiances there. But I think the fact is he scored 11 goals for Bologna last season. It was a really impressive campaign, but early indications there that he could have a really successful season without wanting to promise too much, suggesting he's going to score 20 goals a season.
Say he's going to get the golden boot over Haaland. Let's say it.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. But a really encouraging start. And he's not a natural number 9, but if he can contribute goals like that and numbers better than he did last season, then United really are able to offer goals across the pitch.
He contributed a lot of assists, didn't he, in Serie A as well? So I think he's going to be someone who can offer on both fronts there. Thank you for getting involved. Quite a few of you have got involved using the hashtag TransferTalk. Stuart says, Nusem Mazraoui, he started in United's win over Fulham on Friday. And David and Philip, they're with you, Dave. They're saying Onana. But yeah, so some good options there. Thank you very much, guys. We're going to see some more debutants tonight, aren't we? Of course, Dominic Solanke could well make his Spurs debut. It's the final game of the opening weekend. It's the Monday Night Football, of course. Make sure you tune in from 6:30. Leicester's first game back in the Premier League. And it is live on Sky Sports Premier League. Right, Fulham have reopened talks with Manchester United over the signing of the midfielder Scott McTominay. Fulham had 2 bids rejected earlier in the window. They weren't expected to go back in unless United were willing to negotiate on the asking price. There is an expectation that Fulham will go back in with an improved offer if talks go positively. So they've reopened the talks, James. What are your thoughts on this? It sounds like Fulham are pretty keen on McTominay, pretty keen to get this deal done if they can.
Marco Silva said last week they definitely need to sign a central midfielder, and he'd like to sign a centre-back as well. we saw him actually feature against Fulham. He nearly contributed the winner in the end. It came so close coming off his boot and going in the back of the net. 6 minutes against Fulham. He's entered the final year of his contract. I think United are quite relaxed about the situation, though. They know if they sell well in this window, if they could sell somebody like McTominay or Sancho, maybe not Casemiro, he impressed the other night, for decent money, that really helps them and gives them wiggle room to go out and spend more money and perhaps improve their options in midfield. You look at how Fulham set up the other night without Paulinho. They had Lukic in midfield, Pereira and Smith Rowe, Pereira dropping a little bit deeper. I'm intrigued to see where Scott McTominay will fit in, and that's why I'm finding it very interesting to see them pushing really hard for his signature. 2 bids rejected, looking to reopen talks with Fulham, because I think when we saw him at Manchester United alongside Fred, that didn't seem to suit him. He did a credible job there, but he's not his best when he's deep, picking the ball off the defence. That's not his strength. Actually, we found him being better moving forward in the final third of the pitch. And for Scotland, he plays as a centre-back. So maybe Fulham are seeing him as a really versatile option that can fit in a number of positions. And the fact is, he's played more than 200 times for Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs in the world. So that experience could go a long way to helping Fulham as they try and live without Paulinho, who's been one of the best players they've had in the Premier League.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm slightly surprised. I thought they might have gone and tried to prioritise a purely defensive midfielder to slot in as a like-for-like replacement. So, if McTominay comes in, what's that starting midfield looking like for Fulham?
I mean, it goes back to what you were saying there, James, really, and if Fulham are seeing him as a versatile option, I think, from Scott McTominay's point of view, I think he's almost been seen his whole career as a versatile option, and he might be absolutely fine with that. But the same side of the coin, he might also think, well, actually, I'd quite like to nail down a place and become the main man, wherever that is in midfield or in the number 10 position, wherever he sees himself. But I think that's going to be the crucial thing, if and when it gets down to the stage where Fulham get to talk to the player. Where can they sell to him how Marco Silva sees him fit in? Because, I mean, João Palhinha was almost like, a bit of an outlier in terms of tackles off the scale, interceptions off the scale. It's very hard to get a like-for-like in for João Palhinha because he was so good in that position. So if Marco Silva sees him as part of the 2 in the deep positions, maybe that's a change in build-up for Fulham. Maybe it's a change in kind of style a little bit for Marco Silva. Whether he sees him as the kind of number 10 that he's going to bash his way into the box for headers at corners and things like that, and what does that do to Emil Smith-Rowe? So I think it's about where Fulham see him and how he sees himself, really, Scott McTominay.
And how about Man United? I mean, if he leaves, would you be very surprised if they didn't bring in a midfield replacement?
I'd be absolutely gobsmacked if they didn't. I think this is sort of the domino that Manchester United are potentially waiting for to fall in order to get another deal done for another player in central midfield at Old Trafford. There's a lot of strong reporting that Manuel Ugarte of PSG is waiting for Manchester United, is wanting to go to Manchester United, and there's a willingness from both sides to do that, but the equation isn't quite working out in terms of the fee. But also, I do see what you're saying there, James. Man United are quite relaxed because Erik ten Hag does really like Scott McTominay. And actually, there wasn't much great about last season for Manchester United, but in terms of finding a role for Scott McTominay, I think Erik ten Hag did that to a T. As soon as he got into Manchester United, he broke up that partnership of McTominay and Fred, which Manchester United fans have seen for a very long time, have its limitations and some of its strengths, but it needed to be broken up and the evolution needed to take place. And he found this new role for McTominay, sort of further advanced, not getting involved in build-up, not getting involved in trying to necessarily be a chief in breaking play up, but actually getting himself into the box, making third-man runs late into the area, and scoring a decent amount of goals for Manchester United to save points and win points. But Manchester United will definitely be looking for another player in central midfield if Scott McTominay leaves, and also Christian Eriksen. Have to see what happens with the future of him as well. But another player that I think Manchester United would be open to if the right offer came in.
Yeah, Man United, of course, up and running with a win. There is one game left, though, this weekend. It is the Monday Night Football. We're going to be talking Leicester. We're going to be talking Tottenham after the break. Could there be a Spurs player set to join their opponents today? We'll talk about that in a moment. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Real Sociedad midfielder Midfield and Marino was left out of the squad for this weekend's La Liga game against Rayo Vallecano as Arsenal negotiate with Sociedad over a deal for Marino. Left out of the squad. Dave, does that sound? This one is pretty close.
Feels like it's heading towards a conclusion. The direction of travel looks like it's going to be Arsenal at the moment. But as we found out in this transfer window, nothing is a certainty when it comes to Real Sociedad.
Even if a player is pictured at the stadium, as we saw Conor Gallagher,
Doesn't mean
until you
anything.
get that confirmation press release, you don't know.
Exactly. Anything can happen. So many moving parts, as they say, in a transfer. But it does feel like this is heading towards a conclusion. He's obviously entered the final 12 months of his contract, and we think that Real Sociedad would like to recoup some of that money. He's been in talks with Arsenal, and his manager confirmed that he was left out because he has been holding talks over a move away from the club. So it'll be another really statement signing for Arsenal in this transfer window as they continue to strengthen almost in areas that they've already got some really top quality players.
Yeah, but Arsenal fans, if you see him wandering around Highbury, do not take that as guaranteed that he's going to be an Arsenal player. We never know. Right, Wolves played Arsenal on the weekend. As key players in the transfer window, they've received some large fees, close to £100 million, but it's been a very quiet few weeks for them. They haven't spent that money yet. Gary O'Neill flagged it up. Not the first time he's done that. Does he have a point? Does he have a reason to be concerned here?
I think so, especially when you consider some of the fixtures they've got at the start of the season as well. They could really find themselves on the back foot by the end of September because they've still got to play Chelsea, Villa, Newcastle and Liverpool for the end of September. I think it's worth bearing in mind the players they've lost over the course of the last 2 or 3 seasons. Kilman, Neto, Nunez, who went to Man City, Nathan Collins, Raul Jimenez, Ruben Neves and Morgan Gibbs-White. Yes, they brought players in, but it's hard to argue with the fact that this squad doesn't feel as strong as it was a few years ago under Nuno when they reached the Europa League. It's not in that same place now. I know they've been battling with different PSR constraints. They brought in a number of players in the January window before last under Julian Lopetegui, so that restricted them somewhat last summer. But now they have brought in decent money in this window. They need to spend well. You don't look at that team thinking they're going to score loads of goals. A lot of pressure on Hwang to have the sort of season he did at times last year when he had a real impact. I think one thing that Gary O'Neill showed is what a good manager is. He'll get them out of trouble, I think, but he needs a bit of help.
All right, running out of time, but quickly on Leicester, because we've got to talk Monday Night Football briefly. There might be an incoming for Steve Cooper. Oliver Skipp is set to sign, completed a medical yesterday. £25 million deal has been finalised, we believe. Is that a signing that's going to get the Leicester fans up?
Well, it's good backup. It's good Premier League experience to go in alongside Winks as well and add to Ndidi as well. So good muscle and good steel in midfield. But I still think Leicester fans will probably be a little bit worried about the top end of the pitch and scoring goals. Patson Daka is injured. Kelechi Iheanacho has left the football club. Vardy probably not expected to start today as well. So they really do need goals and they really do need a forward. But Oliver Skipp will be a welcomed addition, but I still think there's much work to do for Leicester.
Yeah, OK, yeah, wait and see what they do in terms of their business. Of course, hosting Spurs, that's going to be a tough start. Thank you very much, guys. We are back 1 o'clock today, isn't it? Yeah, an hour later than normal. That is because we've got quite a bit coming up before then. We've got the football show. Stephen Warnock and Smith are here to round up the return of the Premier League. And Ref Watch is back. It's an hour long from 11 a.m.